The HOA president's voice crackled through her megaphone as she pointed at my 11-year-old daughter like she was identifying a criminal in a lineup. 5 minutes to surrender that delinquent child before I call the real authorities, she screamed. Her designer heels sinking into my ranch's gravel driveway, while 20 neighbors live-streamed the spectacle. What Meredith Blackwood didn't know was that I wasn't just some helpless single dad. I was Sheriff Ezra Thorne. And she just made the biggest mistake of her entitled life. This is the story of how one power-drunk HOA president tried to destroy my family, and how we brought down her entire reign of suburban terror. The morning had started peacefully enough. Willow and I were feeding the horses when I noticed the crowd gathering at our gate around 8:30 a.m. Through the kitchen window, I could see Meredith Blackwood standing at the front of the mob, her platinum blonde hair perfectly coiffed, despite the Texas humidity. She wore what looked like a $3,000 suit, completely impractical for standing on a dirt road, but perfect for the image she wanted to project: untouchable suburban royalty. "Dad, why are all those people here?" Willow asked, her voice small as she peered through the curtains. My daughter had her mother's gentle eyes and quiet strength, but right now she looked exactly what she was, scared 11-year-old who didn't understand why adults were gathering outside her home with phones and angry faces. "Stay inside, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice calm despite the rage building in my chest. Through the window, I could see Tom Hutchinson, our neighbor from 2 houses down, holding his phone high to capture every moment. Behind him, at least 15 other residents of Brazos Heights had assembled, their morning coffee runs abandoned in favor of whatever drama Meredith had orchestrated. I stepped onto the porch, deliberately leaving my sheriff's badge inside. Sometimes it was better to see how far people would go when they thought you were powerless. The morning sun cast long shadows across the property, and I noticed Meredith had positioned herself so the light hit her just right for the cameras. This wasn't just intimidation, it was a performance. "Ezra Thorne," Meredith's voice boomed through the megaphone, causing several horses in the nearby pasture to shift nervously. "I know you're listening. Your daughter let those animals run wild through our community gardens last night. $300,000 in damage. The Heritage Rose Garden is completely destroyed." I felt my jaw tighten. Our horses had been secure in their stalls all night. I'd checked them myself at 10 p.m. before turning in. But what really caught my attention was the precision of the accusation. Someone had definitely let horses into the HOA's prized gardens. But it hadn't been our horses. And it certainly hadn't been Willow. Moving toward the gate with measured steps, I kept my expression neutral. The crowd grew quiet as I approached, their phones swiveling to track my movement like predators sensing prey. Meredith's lips curved into what she probably thought was a triumphant smile. "Mr. Thorne," she said, lowering the megaphone now that I was closer. "As president of the Brazos Heights Homeowners Association, I'm here to inform you that your daughter's criminal behavior will not be tolerated. The board held an emergency session at 6 a.m. this morning, and we voted unanimously. You have 5 minutes to bring that delinquent child out here to face the consequences." "And what consequences would those be?" I asked, noting how several people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Most of them were good people, caught up in Meredith's web of intimidation. They knew crossing her meant facing her wrath. But something about targeting a child didn't sit right with them. Meredith pulled out an official-looking document, waving it like a weapon. "Immediate eviction proceedings, a $50,000 fine for property damage, and a recommendation to Child Protective Services that this environment is unsafe for a minor." Her voice carried across the property, ensuring everyone could hear. "You've turned this ranch into a hazard, Mr. Thorne. Wild animals running free. No proper supervision for your daughter. What kind of father leaves an 11-year-old alone with dangerous livestock?" Behind her, I noticed someone I didn't recognize, a young man in his 20s with dark hair, holding a professional camera instead of a phone. He seemed to be focusing on specific angles, documenting everything with more purpose than the casual live streamers. Something about him nagged at me, but I filed it away for later consideration. "Mrs. Blackwood," I said, using her formal name deliberately. "My daughter was in bed by 9 p.m. last night. Our horses were secured in their stalls, which I personally checked. If horse damaged HOA property, I suggest you investigate who actually had access to both horses and the gardens." Her face flushed red, but she recovered quickly. Typical response from someone who thinks rules don't apply to them. "Your property is an eyesore, Mr. Thorne. 200 acres of chaos in the middle of our pristine community. The board has tolerated your lifestyle long enough. The way she said lifestyle made it clear this wasn't really about horses or gardens. Meredith had been circling our property like a vulture ever since my wife passed 2 years ago. A single father with a valuable ranch in the middle of her kingdom, we were an anomaly she couldn't control. And that drove her crazy. 5 minutes, she repeated, actually pulling out her phone and setting a timer. The beeping echoed across the space between us. Bring out your daughter. Or I call the real authorities. The police will handle this properly, since you clearly can't control your own child. I glanced back at the house where I could see Willow's face pressed against the window, tears streaming down her cheeks. Every instinct screamed at me to reveal my identity, to shut this down with the authority of my badge. But something held me back, a nagging feeling that Meredith had more planned than just this confrontation. Mrs. Blackwood, I said slowly, before you make any calls, you should know that I have security cameras covering every inch of this property. If someone let horses into your gardens, I'll have footage of it. For just a moment, something flickered across her face, not surprise, but calculation. She'd known about the cameras, which meant either she was supremely confident, or this was about something bigger than property damage. Security footage can be doctored, she said loudly, playing to her audience. Everyone knows that what matters is the damage done, and your failure as a parent. This ranch is a liability to our community values. Behind her, I saw Dorothy Bang, our 72-year-old neighbor, standing at the edge of the crowd. Unlike the others, she wasn't recording. Instead, she watched Meredith with an expression I'd seen before on witnesses who were deciding whether to speak up or stay silent. Dorothy had lived in Brazos Heights longer than anyone, had seen HOA presidents come and go. But something about the way she gripped her walking cane told me Meredith had crossed a line even Dorothy couldn't ignore. The timer on Meredith's phone continued its countdown. 4 minutes. 3 minutes. The crowd waited with bated breath, some looking uncomfortable, others eager for drama to post online. The young man with the professional camera had moved to get a better angle, and I noticed he kept touching his ERA communications device. Maybe? Was he streaming to someone specific? You know, I said conversationally, false accusations against a minor are a serious matter. So is harassment. And filing false reports with CPS? Meredith's smile widened. Oh, Mr. Thorne, are you threatening me? How typical. Everyone heard you threatening the HOA president while she's trying to protect the community. That will play wonderfully in court. 2 minutes. The beeping grew more insistent. Dad? Willow's voice came from behind me. She'd come outside despite my instructions. Standing on the porch in her pajamas and boots. I didn't do anything wrong. I made sure all the horses were in their stalls last night. Just like you taught me. The crowd's attention shifted to her, and I saw several expressions soften. Willow wasn't some delinquent, she was a quiet, responsible kid who helped with 4-H programs and volunteered at the local animal shelter. But Meredith had momentum now, and she wasn't about to let sympathy derail her plan. Of course you'd say that, Meredith said, her voice dripping with false concern. But we have witnesses who saw horses with your ranch's brand in the gardens at 2 a.m. this morning, don't we? Tom? Tom Hutchinson looked uncomfortable but nodded reluctantly. I saw horses. Had the Circle T brand. That's when I knew this was definitely a setup. Our horses were branded with a rocking T, not a Circle T. Someone had brought in horses specifically to frame us, and Tom was either in on it or too scared to contradict Meredith's version of events. 1 minute. Willow, go back inside, I said quietly. Call Miss Dorothy and ask her to come over. As my daughter retreated, I pulled out my own phone. Not to reveal my identity, not yet, but to send a quick text to my deputy. Run a check on all horse trailers that entered Brazos Heights between midnight and 3 a.m. Access gate logs. The timer hit 30 seconds. And Meredith practically vibrated with anticipation. Last chance? Mr. Thorne, hand over your daughter for questioning. Or face the full consequences of your negligence. The only negligence here, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, is an HOA president who thinks she can terrorize an 11-year-old girl to steal property. The crowd gasped. I'd said the quiet part out loud. This wasn't about horses or gardens. This was about 200 acres of prime real estate that developers had been eyeing for years. Land that would be worth $20 million if subdivided for luxury homes. Meredith's face contorted with rage. How dare you? I've devoted my life to maintaining standards in this community. Your ranch is a blight. Your daughter is out of control. And you, she paused, seeming to remember her audience. You're about to learn what happens to people who don't respect the rules. The timer hit 0 with a shrill alarm that made several people jump. Time's up, she announced triumphantly. I'm calling the authorities right now. She dialed dramatically, putting the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. Yes. This is Meredith Blackwood, president of the Brazos Heights HOA. I need to report a case of child endangerment and property destruction at 2000 Meadowbrook Lane. The parent is being uncooperative and hostile. As she spoke, I noticed Dorothy Bang had moved closer, her phone out now but pointed at Meredith. Not me. The young man with the camera had repositioned again, and I caught a glimpse of his profile, something familiar about the shape of his jaw. The way he held himself. Units are on the way. The dispatcher's voice came through Meredith's speaker. Can you confirm the nature of the endangerment? A minor child, left unsupervised with dangerous animals, Meredith said, her eyes locked on mine. The parent is negligent and combative. We're concerned for the child's safety. That's when I made my decision. Not to reveal my identity, something still held me back from that, but to start documenting everything. I pulled out my phone and began recording, making sure to capture Meredith's triumphant expression. For the record, I said clearly, I am stating that these accusations are false and malicious. My daughter was supervised and safe. Our animals were secured, and this appears to be a coordinated attempt to harass and intimidate us off our property. Meredith laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. Record all you want. I have 20 witnesses here who'll testify to your negligence, don't I? The crowd murmured uncertainly. Some nodded, but others looked away. Fear was a powerful motivator in HOA politics, but targeting a child had crossed a line for many of them. You know what I find interesting? I said, keeping my voice conversational as sirens wailed in the distance. The Heritage Rose Garden has security cameras, high-definition ones, that the HOA installed last year after the vandalism incident. Those cameras would show exactly what happened last night. Meredith's smile flickered for just a moment. Those cameras experienced technical difficulties last night. Convenient, isn't it? Just like how your cameras will probably have mysteriously failed too. But I was already pulling up my phone's security app, showing the screen to the crowd. Actually, my cameras worked perfectly. And they show something very interesting at 1:47 a.m. this morning. The sirens grew louder, and I saw 2 patrol cars turning onto our street. Meredith's expression shifted from triumph to calculation. She thought she had won. Thought the police would automatically side with the HOA president making a complaint. She had no idea she was about to face her colleagues. What they show, I continued, loud enough for everyone to hear, is someone in a dark pickup truck stopping at our gate. Someone who got out and spent exactly 3 minutes doing something to our fence before driving away. The same fence that was mysteriously cut open this morning, allowing someone to lead horses out. The crowd's murmur grew louder. The young man with the camera had gone very still, and I noticed him touch his ear again, as if receiving instructions. You're lying, Meredith snapped, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. Even if that's true, it doesn't explain how your horses ended up in our gardens. Our horses didn't end up anywhere, I said calmly. They're still in their stalls. Would anyone like to verify that? Dorothy Bang stepped forward. I would, she said, her voice carrying surprising authority. In fact, I think we should all see these horses that supposedly destroyed the gardens. Meredith rounded on her. Dorothy, this doesn't concern you. Go home before you involve yourself in something you'll regret. The threat was naked and ugly, and several people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Threatening an elderly woman wasn't a good look, even for Meredith. The patrol cars pulled up, and 2 officers got out. I recognized them immediately, Officers Janet Mills and Brian Garrison, good cops who I'd worked with for years. They approached professionally, taking in the scene with practiced eyes. We received a call about child endangerment, Officer Mills said, her gaze sweeping the crowd before landing on Meredith. Yes, Meredith stepped forward eagerly. This man has been keeping his daughter in dangerous conditions. And last night she let horses run wild through HOA property. When I tried to address it, he became hostile and threatening. Officer Garrison looked at me, and I saw recognition flicker in his eyes. But like the professionals they were, both officers maintained neutral expressions. Sir, can we speak with you? Officer Mills asked. Of course, I said. Would you like to come inside? My daughter is quite upset by all this. That won't be necessary yet, Officer Garrison said. First, Can you tell us your version of events? I explained calmly about the false accusations, the cut fence, and the security footage. As I spoke, I noticed Meredith growing more agitated, her fingers drumming against her leg in an irregular pattern. He's lying, she burst out. Check the gardens. You'll see the damage. Hundreds of thousands of dollars destroyed because he can't control his animals or his child. Officer Mills turned to her. Ma'am, we'll investigate all claims. Can you provide evidence that this man's horses were in your gardens? Tom saw them. Meredith pointed at Tom Hutchinson, who looked like he wanted to sink into the ground. Tell them what you saw. Tom cleared his throat nervously. I saw horses. In the gardens. Around 2 a.m. Can you identify them specifically as belonging to Mr. Thorne? Officer Garrison asked. Tom's gaze darted between Meredith and the officers. They had brands. Circle T brands. I couldn't help but smile slightly. Officer, our brand is a Rocking T, not a Circle T. It's registered with the county. You can verify that easily. The young man with the camera suddenly moved, heading quickly toward a car parked down the street. But Dorothy Bang, showing surprising agility, stepped into his path. Leaving so soon? She asked loudly. Don't you want to film the resolution? He muttered something and tried to go around her, but she moved with him, her cane creating an effective barrier. You know, you look familiar. Aren't you Damien, Meredith's son? The crowd went silent. All eyes turned to the young man, who'd gone pale. Meredith's face cycled through several colors before settling on a dangerous purple. That's ridiculous, she sputtered. My son lives in Austin. He's a financial analyst. But Damien, because it was clearly him, had stopped trying to escape. He stood frozen as Dorothy continued with the satisfied air of someone revealing a winning poker hand. Financial analyst? That's interesting. Because I saw him at your house just yesterday. And the day before. In fact, he's been staying with you for the past 2 weeks. Hasn't he? The revelation rippled through the crowd like wildfire. People started murmuring. Phones came back up, and I saw several neighbors beginning to piece together the setup. Meredith had brought in her son to document the confrontation, probably to edit the footage later for maximum impact. Officers, I said quietly, I think it might be time to look at all the security footage from last night, not just mine, but the HOA's gate logs showing who entered and left, and maybe check if any horse trailers came through that weren't going to my property. Officer Mills nodded slowly. That sounds like a good idea. Ma'am? She turned to Meredith. We'll need to see all HOA security records from last night. You need a warrant for that, Meredith stammered. Actually, I said, pulling out my wallet. You don't. The moment had come. I flipped open the wallet, revealing the badge I'd carried for 15 years. The gold star caught the morning sun, and the words County Sheriff seemed to echo in the sudden silence, because I'm Sheriff Ezra Thorne, and I'm officially opening an investigation into false reporting, harassment of a minor, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The crowd's gasp was audible. Phones swung between Meredith and me, capturing her transformation from righteous accuser to cornered predator. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. No sound emerging. But it was Damien's reaction that proved most interesting. He didn't look surprised, he looked relieved, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He pulled something from his pocket, and I tensed. But it was just a flash drive. I'm done, he said quietly, but his voice carried in the morning air. Mom, I'm done being part of this. Damien! Meredith shrieked. Don't you dare. But he was already walking toward Officer Mills, holding out the flash drive. Everything's on here. The plan to frame the Thorns, the horses we brought in from Garrett County, the fence cutting, even the communications with Pinnacle Development about the land value once the ranch is gone. The crowd erupted. People were shouting questions, and phones were recording from every angle, and someone had started a live stream that was already gathering viewers. The title read, HOA, President Busted Trying to Frame Sheriff's Daughter. Meredith's carefully constructed world was crumbling in real time, broadcast to the entire community and beyond. But as I watched her face cycle through rage, disbelief, and finally, a dangerous kind of calculation, I knew this wasn't over. She raised the megaphone one more time, her voice cutting through the chaos. You think you've won? You have no idea what you're dealing with. Sheriff, I own this community. I own the judges, the city council. A loud squeal of feedback cut her off as the megaphone suddenly malfunctioned, but in that moment of silence, another sound became audible, the distinct whir of a drone overhead. Everyone looked up to see a professional-grade drone with a camera hovering above the scene. Dorothy Bang smiled sweetly. "Oh, did I mention my grandson works for Channel 9 News? He's been very interested in doing a story on HOA corruption. I told him this morning might be a good time to gather footage." Meredith's scream of rage was primal. She lunged toward Dorothy, but Officers Mills and Garrison intercepted her. "Ma'am, you need to calm down," Officer Mills said firmly. "Calm down? Calm down?" Meredith's voice rose to a shriek. "They set me up. This is entrapment. I'll sue everyone. I'll destroy all of you." As the officers tried to control the situation, my phone buzzed. The text from my deputy made my blood run cold. "Boss, you need to see this. Meredith Blackwood isn't her real name. Her actual identity, this goes deeper than HOA corruption." I looked up to find Damien watching me, and he nodded slowly, as if he knew what I'd just learned. Whatever we'd uncovered here was just the tip of the iceberg. But before I could process that, Willow's scream pierced the morning air. I spun toward the house to see smoke billowing from the back of the property, right where the stables were located. "The horses," someone shouted, as I ran toward the fire, leaving the officers to handle Meredith. I heard her laughter rising above the chaos, wild, unhinged, and triumphant. "5 minutes," she screamed. "I told you 5 minutes. You should have just given me what I wanted." The morning had started with a false accusation about horses destroying gardens. Now, with real flames, threatening real animals, and my daughter's terrified face in the window, I realized Meredith Blackwood, or whoever she really was, had been playing a much deadlier game than any of us had imagined. The acrid smell of smoke filled my lungs as I sprinted toward the stables, my boots pounding against the dirt path. Behind me, I could hear Officer Mills calling for fire and rescue while Officer Garrison worked to contain the chaos at the gate. But all I could think about was the 17 horses trapped in that burning building and my daughter's prize mare, Buttercup, who Willow had raised from a foal. "Dad!" Willow appeared at my side. Having ignored my earlier order to stay inside, "I already opened the back gates, Mr. Rodriguez is getting the horses out from the north side." My heart swelled with pride, even as fear coursed through me. Miguel Rodriguez, our ranch hand, must have seen the smoke from his house on the property, but the fire was spreading fast, too fast to be accidental. "Good girl," I said, pulling off my jacket. "Get the hose from the equipment shed. Spray down the hay storage to keep it from catching." As Willow ran off, I dove into the smoke-filled stable. The horses were panicking, their frightened whinnies mixing with the crackling of flames. I could see Miguel at the far end, leading out 2 mares. But there were still at least 10 horses trapped in the middle stalls where the smoke was thickest. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The fire hadn't started in one place. There were 3 distinct points of origin, forming a triangle that would ensure maximum damage in minimum time. This was arson, professionally done. Sheriff Dorothy Bang appeared in the doorway, wielding a fire extinguisher like a weapon. "The fire department's 5 minutes out, but we can't wait." Together, we worked to evacuate the horses. Dorothy, showing strength that belied her 72 years, held stall doors while I let out the terrified animals. The smoke grew thicker, and I pulled my shirt over my nose, remembering my fire training from the academy. "That's the last one," Miguel shouted as we emerged with a pair of yearlings, but Willow's scream cut through the chaos. "Buttercup's still in there, the corner stall." I didn't hesitate. Plunging back into the inferno, I navigated by memory more than sight. The corner stall was the furthest from the exit, where the smoke was densest. I found Buttercup pressed against the back wall, too terrified to move, despite her stall door hanging open. "Easy, girl," I murmured, approaching slowly. "Willow needs you safe," whether it was my voice or pure luck. "Buttercup, let me grab her halter." We stumbled toward the exit together, the heat now unbearable against my skin. Just as I thought we wouldn't make it, fresh air hit my lungs. We burst into daylight to find Willow sobbing with relief and the fire trucks finally arriving. "Everyone back," Fire Chief Ramon Gutierrez ordered, his crew already deploying hoses. "This fire's got accelerant all over it." "Sheriff, you hurt?" "I'm fine," I coughed, handing Buttercup's lead to Willow. "Ramon, this was arson. 3 origin points. Probably gasoline or kerosene," a quiet voice said behind us. We turned to find Damien Blackwood standing there, his face pale but determined. "She keeps 5-gallon containers in her garage for the community landscaping equipment." I studied him carefully. You knew she was planning this? He shook his head violently. The horses. The frame job. Yes. But not this. When she realized her plan was falling apart, she must have activated her backup plan. He pulled out his phone, showing me a text thread. She's been messaging someone called Phoenix. I think it's her handler from Pinnacle Development. My deputy's earlier message suddenly made more sense. Damien. I need you to tell me everything. Starting with your mother's real name. He glanced around nervously at the growing crowd neighbors. Emergency responders. And now several news vans that had arrived following Dorothy's grandson's drone footage. Can we talk somewhere private? What I have to say? It's going to destroy more than just her HOA presidency. 20 minutes later, we sat in my home office, me, Damien, Dorothy, and Officers Mills and Garrison. The fire was under control. No horses had been seriously injured, and Meredith was in custody. Though she demanded a lawyer and refused to speak, outside, news crews were having a field day with the story of an HOA president arrested for arson and attempted frame-up of a sheriff. Her name isn't Meredith Blackwood. Damien began, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee Dorothy had made. It's Miranda Bellworth. She was a real estate attorney in California until 8 years ago, when she was disbarred for embezzling client funds and orchestrating fraudulent property transfers. Officer Mills was taking notes while Garrison recorded the conversation. I leaned back, pieces of a larger puzzle starting to fit together. She moved to Texas, created a new identity, and married my stepfather, Richard Blackwood. Damien continued. He was wealthy, owned several properties, and most importantly, he was lonely. They were married for 3 years before he died of a heart attack. He paused, his voice bitter. The autopsy was inconclusive, but I always wondered, when did she become HOA president? Dorothy asked, though something in her expression suggested she already knew the answer. 4 years ago, right after Richard died. She used his connections, his reputation, started small noise complaint, parking violations. But each family she targeted had one thing in common: valuable property that developers wanted. I pulled up files on my laptop. The Navarro family, the Johnsons, the Bang family. Wait. Dorothy. She went after you? Dorothy's smile was sharp. She tried. Cost me $15,000 in legal fees. But I didn't budge. That's when I started keeping records. Every meeting, every threat, every suspicious transaction. She got sloppy with you. Damien said to me. The other families, she took months, sometimes years to wear down. But your ranch? Pinnacle Development offered her $1 million finder's fee if she could deliver it within 6 months. That deadline is next week. So she escalated. I said, understanding dawning. The false accusations, the public confrontation, and when that failed, burn the evidence and claim the ranch is a fire hazard. Garrison finished. Force an emergency condemnation. My phone rang the mayor. I put it on speaker. Ezra. What the hell is happening out there? I've got CNN calling about a corrupt HOA president trying to burn down the sheriff's horse ranch. Patricia. We've uncovered a major conspiracy involving fraudulent property transfers and organized crime. I need you to freeze all HOA assets immediately and call an emergency city council meeting. Done. The governor's office is also asking questions. Ezra. How deep does this go? I looked at Damien. We're still finding out. After I hung up, Damien pulled out a laptop. I've been gathering evidence for months, trying to find a way to stop her that wouldn't destroy my own life. But when she targeted a child, he looked at me with haunted eyes. I have 3 younger half-siblings from my father's first marriage. I've watched her manipulate and threaten people for years. But going after Willow was too far. He opened a folder containing hundreds of documents, financial records, emails, recorded conversations. The scope was staggering. Miranda Bellworth, alias Meredith Blackwood, had orchestrated the forced sale of 12 properties across 3 HOA communities, generating over $40 million for Pinnacle Development and nearly $5 million in kickbacks for herself. This email thread, Damien pointed to the screen, shows her communicating with Marcus Pinnacle himself. He's not just aware of her method, she's directing them. Marcus Pinnacle, I knew that name. One of the state's biggest developers, with connections reaching into state government. This wasn't just local corruption, it was a conspiracy that could reach the Attorney General's office. We need federal involvement, I said, reaching for my phone. This crosses state lines, involves mail fraud, RICO violations. A loud crash interrupted me. Through the window, we could see smoke rising again, but this time, from the direction of the HOA clubhouse. She's destroying evidence. Dorothy said urgently, all the HOA records are in that building. But I was already moving. Garrison and Mills beside me, as we ran toward the clubhouse. I called dispatch. All units to Brazos Heights clubhouse. Possible arson in progress. The clubhouse was indeed on fire. But standing in front of it, laughing maniacally, was Meredith Miranda holding a can of kerosene. She'd somehow escaped custody. Though how became clear when we saw Officer Davis unconscious by his patrol car. 5 minutes, she screamed when she saw me. I gave you 5 minutes to comply. And you destroyed everything. 20 years of work, building my empire. And you ruined it, Miranda Bellworth. I said, drawing my service weapon, put down the kerosene and step away from the building. She laughed, wild and unhinged. That's not my name anymore. I buried that weak woman years ago. I am Meredith Blackwood. President of nothing. Dorothy interrupted, appearing beside me with her phone raised. I uploaded everything to the cloud an hour ago. Every document, every email, every financial record from the HOA office. Your bonfire is meaningless. The expression on Miranda's face was almost comical shock, rage, and disbelief warring for dominance. But then she smiled, cold and calculating. You think you've won? I've destroyed families, ruined lives, and gotten rich doing it. Even if I go to prison, the damage is done. Those people will never get their homes back. Their children will never forget being driven from their communities. Actually, a new voice said, they will. Marcus Pinnacle stepped out of a luxury SUV, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits. Law enforcement trained, I could tell by their bearing. Private security. Probably armed. Marcus, Miranda breathed. You came to clean up your mess, he said coldly. You've become a liability. Meredith, the FBI raided my offices an hour ago. 40 years building my company, and you destroyed it with your sloppy greed. I kept my weapon trained on Miranda while processing this new development. Mr. Pinnacle, I'm going to need you to. I'm here to make a deal. Sheriff, he interrupted. Full cooperation. All records. Complete testimony against her and the network she was part of. In exchange, I want immunity. That's not my call to make. I said carefully. No. But it's mine. A new voice said. FBI Special Agent Rachel Torres stepped out of another vehicle. Badge prominently displayed. We've been investigating Pinnacle development for 18 months. Miss Bellworth here just accelerated our timeline. Miranda's face had gone white. You set me up. All of you. No. Agent Torres said calmly. You set yourself up when you decided to target a law enforcement family. Did you really think burning down a sheriff's property wouldn't trigger a federal response? The standoff lasted another tense minute before Miranda finally dropped the kerosene can. As officers Mills and Garrison took her into custody properly, this time she looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't over. I have friends. Resources you can't imagine. You'll pay for. Oh. Shut up. Dorothy said, stunning everyone. You're a small-time con artist who got lucky. Your friends are already distancing themselves. Check your phone. Miranda fumbled for her phone with cuffed hands, and I saw her face crumble as she read message after message. Her network was abandoning her, leaving her to face justice alone. As they led her away, she turned back one last time. 5 minutes, she whispered. If you'd just given me 5 minutes of compliance, none of this would have happened. You're right, I said quietly. In 5 minutes, you revealed yourself as a predator. In 5 minutes, you united a community against you. In 5 minutes, you destroyed your own empire. Thank you for those 5 minutes. Her scream of rage echoed across the complex as the patrol car drove away. The next few hours were a blur of statements, evidence collection, and media management. The story had gone national sheriff exposes HOA corruption. Ring was trending on every platform. Families who'd been driven out by Miranda were already calling, hoping to reclaim their homes, or at least see justice done. That evening, as the sun set over our ranch, I found Willow brushing Buttercup in the temporary shelter we'd set up. The main stable would need extensive repairs, but the horses were safe. Dad, she said quietly, was I brave today? Ich nicht bisher. Thinking of how she'd helped evacuate the horses, how she'd stood up to Miranda's intimidation, how she'd shown more courage than many adults. "You were extraordinary," I said simply. Dorothy appeared in the doorway, smiling. "The city council just held an emergency vote. The HOA has been dissolved, pending a full investigation, and they want to give you a commendation, Willow, for helping save the horses." Willow blushed but smiled. "What's going to happen to all those families, Mrs. Black, I mean? Miss Bellworth hurt? There's a restitution fund being set up," I explained. "Pinnacle Development's assets are being liquidated to compensate victims. It won't undo all the pain, but it's a start." "And Damien?" Willow asked. "Is he in trouble?" I'd wondered the same thing, but Agent Torres had been clear Damien's cooperation made him a witness, not a defendant. His recordings and documents would be crucial in prosecuting not just his stepmother, but the entire network she'd been part of. 3 months later, I stood in a packed courtroom as Miranda Bellworth was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for racketeering, fraud, arson, and conspiracy. Marcus Pinnacle, despite his attempted cooperation, received 15 years. 17 other individuals across 5 states were also convicted. The Navarro family moved back to the neighborhood, into a house purchased with their restitution funds. The Johnsons started a support group for HOA abuse victims that grew to thousands of members nationwide. Dorothy Bang was elected interim HOA president and immediately disbanded all enforcement committees, replacing them with community support initiatives. But the most meaningful moment came when 12 families gathered at our ranch for a barbecue. Kids who'd been driven from their homes played with Willow, their laughter mixing with the sound of horses in the rebuilt stables. Parents who'd been isolated and intimidated now supported each other, sharing stories and resources. "You know what I learned from all this?" Willow said, standing beside me as we watched the gathering. "What's that, sweetheart?" "Bullies are scariest when people face them alone. But together," she smiled, wise beyond her 11 years, "together, we're unstoppable." Tom Hutchinson approached, looking sheepish. "Sheriff, I owe you an apology. I knew those weren't your horses, but I was so scared of her. Fear makes us all do things we regret," I said, offering my hand. "What matters is what we do next." He shook it gratefully. "I'm testifying at the civil trial next week, making sure every family gets what they're owed." As the sun set over Brazos Heights, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I thought about those 5 minutes that had changed everything. 5 minutes when a corrupt HOA president thought she could destroy my family. 5 minutes that had instead revealed the strength of a community united against injustice. Damien had started a nonprofit consulting firm helping HOA abuse victims gather evidence and find legal representation. His first client was a family in Oregon facing similar tactics from their board. Within a year, he'd helped expose corruption in dozens of communities. The ranch's security footage from that morning became evidence in a landmark case that led to sweeping HOA reform legislation. The Willow Thorne Act, as reporters had dubbed it, established strict oversight requirements for homeowner associations and severe penalties for board members who abused their power. But standing there, watching my daughter lead a group of kids to meet the new foals, I wasn't thinking about legal victories or systemic change. I was thinking about a promise I'd made to my late wife to protect our daughter and give her a life filled with love, not fear. "She'd be proud," Dorothy said softly, appearing beside me with her ever-present wisdom. "Of Willow, of both of you. You didn't just protect your daughter, Ezra. You protected every child in this community from growing up under that woman's reign of terror." A year later, at the dedication of the Elizabeth Thorne Memorial Garden built, where the old HOA clubhouse had burned, hundreds gathered to celebrate. The garden featured a playground, community plots where families could grow vegetables together, and a memorial wall listing every family that had been wrongfully driven from their homes. Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes. "Damien told me you're starting a youth mentorship program. My daughter's interested. She wants to learn what real leadership looks like." And so the circle of healing continued. Where once an HOA president had ruled through fear, demanding 5 minutes of compliance, now a community thrived on mutual respect and shared purpose. The ranch that Miranda had tried to steal became a symbol of resistance against abuse of power. Every month, we hosted Freedom Fridays where kids could ride horses, learn about animal care, and most importantly, learn to stand up for themselves and others. Willow became a peer counselor, helping other children who'd experienced bullying or intimidation. The FBI investigation eventually exposed a network of corrupt HOA boards across 12 states, all connected to developers like Pinnacle. Hundreds of families received restitution, and thousands more found the courage to challenge abusive boards in their own communities. But for all the systemic change and legal victories, what mattered most happened in small moments. Like when the Navarro's daughter, who'd been too traumatized to speak after being forced from her home, finally laughed again while playing with Willow. Or when Tom Hutchinson, freed from his fear, became our neighborhood's most vocal advocate for transparency and accountability. "Dad," Willow said one evening as we checked on the horses, "do you think there are more people like Miranda out there?" "Probably," I admitted. "Power can corrupt anyone who forgets they're meant to serve, not rule." "Then we keep teaching people to stand up to them?" "We do. One community at a time." She nodded, satisfied. "Good. Because no kid should have to be afraid in their own home." As we walked back to the house, past the spot where Miranda had once stood, with her megaphone demanding submission, I reflected on how those 5 minutes had changed not just our lives, but potentially thousands of others. 5 minutes that proved a simple truth: when good people stand together, no bully, no matter how powerful, can prevail. The ranch stood strong against the Texas sunset, no longer a target but a beacon. And somewhere out there, in communities across the country, other families were learning what we'd proven that chaotic morning, that 5 minutes of courage could overcome years of fear. Justice isn't always swift, and it isn't always complete. But when a community decides that enough is enough, when neighbors support neighbors, when children like Willow show more bravery than adults, that's when real change happens. And it all started with 5 minutes and a sheriff who refused to hand over his daughter to a suburban tyrant. The morning sun cast familiar shadows across the ranch as I watched Willow, now 15, teaching a group of foster children how to approach horses safely. Her patience reminded me so much of her mother that my chest tightened with bittersweet pride. "Remember," she told them gently, "horses can sense fear, but they respect courage. Just like people." One little boy, maybe 8 years old, hung back from the group. Something in his posture, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast, told a story I'd seen too many times before. "Hey there," I said, crouching beside him. "I'm Sheriff Thorne. What's your name?" "Miguel," he whispered, "like the man who helped save the horses." I smiled. Miguel Rodriguez had become something of a legend in these parts. The ranch hand who'd risked his life to save 17 horses from a fire. That's a brave name to carry. "You want to tell me what's troubling you?" The boy glanced around nervously. "The lady at our group home, she says if we don't behave perfectly, she'll write bad reports. Says no family will want us." My jaw tightened. Another petty tyrant using power to terrorize children. But this time, we had systems in place. "Willow," I called, "can you come here a moment?" My daughter approached. Immediately reading the situation, she'd developed an uncanny ability to spot abuse victims, a skill born from her own experience. "Miguel's worried about someone at his group home," I said carefully. Willow's eyes flashed with understanding. She knelt beside the boy. "You know what? 3 years ago, a mean lady tried to scare me too. She had lots of power and thought she could take me away from my dad." "What happened?" Miguel asked, eyes wide. "My dad's the sheriff." But that didn't matter. What mattered was that our whole community stood up to her together. She's in prison now, and kids in our town don't have to be afraid anymore. I pulled out my phone. "Miguel, would it be okay if I had someone look into your group home? Someone who specializes in protecting children?" He nodded slowly, hope flickering in his eyes. Within an hour, Damian Blackwood, now a licensed child advocate, was on his way. His nonprofit had expanded to include a rapid response team for institutional abuse cases. The boy who'd once helped his stepmother terrorize families now dedicated his life to protecting the vulnerable. As I watched Willow lead Miguel to meet Buttercup, her prize mare who'd survived the fire, Dorothy Bang appeared beside me with her morning coffee. "Another one?" she asked softly. "Seems like it. But this time, he won't face it alone." Dorothy smiled. "You know, Ezra, that morning when Meredith Miranda, whatever her name was, gave you 5 minutes? She had no idea she was creating an army of protectors. She was right. Those 5 minutes had rippled outward, creating waves of change that continued to this day. HOA reform legislation, child protection networks, community watch programs specifically designed to prevent institutional abuse, all traced back to that morning when a corrupt HOA president thought she could steal my daughter. Dad, Willow called out, her face glowing with joy. Miguel wants to learn to ride. As I walked toward them, I thought about the sign we'd installed at the ranch entrance, Freedom Ranch, where courage grows. It had become more than a place, it was a promise. A promise that no child would face a bully alone. That no family would be driven from their home without a fight. That 5 minutes of courage could indeed change the world. And it all started with a mother who couldn't steal what we'd refused to give her fear, our home. And most importantly, our community's children,